He wrote this book called Dover Court, Toowong's Hidden Treasure and Its People, and it has got it's sensational. Get it at historyouthere.com. Let's talk to Harold, the Peacock, our historian. Harold, how are you, mate?
Hey, very well, Danny. How you going?
Mate, last week, this is a wonderful book, mate. This is called Dover Court. Just give it a little plug again, man.
Yeah, it's about a house built in 1865 in Brisbane, and it's one of the most historic houses, but unknown houses in Brisbane. And there's 10 chapters in there, about 10 different families that live there. And I'll be telling you over the coming weeks about some of those with Ipswich connections. It's just amazing, Dover Court, the house, just how historic it really is.
It is, and you wouldn't believe when you see a picture from the air where it's a weren't they? They were brilliant builders those days. Then the balustrade, is that what they call it, around the edges?
That's the verandas that you're struggling with? That's right.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And, Queenslanders, they all knock us to Southerners, but Queenslanders were built, and I used to live in one at Kangaroo Point as a kid, and the flow-through from the front, to the back door, and you had the veranda under the house was cool. It was brilliant, wasn't it? So, mate, that's...
it's absolutely beautiful. Beautiful verandas, beautiful building.
What about all the trees and that around it? And it's the middle of Toowong. And you mobs stay away.
There's one tree.
Hold on. Developers, stay away. If you're going to take it... A lady owns it anyhow. She's going to do it up, isn't she?
Absolutely. She loves the history of the place.
That's wonderful. Now, let's talk about the clairvoyant past of the boarding house in Brisbane Street.
Yeah, that's right, Danny, but you probably already knew about it.
No, I didn't. You're a funny man.
But the boarding house in Brisbane Street in Ipswich 120 years ago was owned by Mrs. Matilda Walter. And like you're thinking, it did have a bit of a spooky history. Well, it starts off with Mrs. Walter's son was a hairdresser, George Walter Jr., who was regularly convicted of illegal bookmaking.
Wow.
Her granddaughter was Miss Mona Walter. Now, Mona helped found Ipswich's first radio station, 4IP, at the old flour mill in 1935.
Are you serious? What was the name?
Yeah. Mona Walter. And she, in fact, she was appointed the very first official accompanist or musician there, and she later became program director and was called the Queen of Ipswich.
See, but I didn't know that. David Neville Greenwood would know that. Are you listening, David?
Well, the history of this boarding house just stretches across Ipswich. But the thing is, Mrs. Walter's boarding house was first recorded in the newspapers there in 1903. That's when the funeral of Mrs. Walter's 2-year-old niece left from there. But the first signs of misfortune started in 1913. That's when a boarder, William Douglas, badly dislocated and fractured his elbow while playing football during a lunch break around the corner in East Street.
What football?
But
what sword? What sword? Do you know what
rugby league. Well, what else rugby union back then.
Rugby league, wasn't it? Wubby league, as Peter Volandis calls it. Wubby league. Go on with the wubby league.
Well, he was tough. He was tough anyway. He was an iron worker, and he just shrugged off the broken elbow. But anyway, Death first came to the boarding house in 1918.
Right.
That's when Mrs. Walter's oldest daughter, Anna, was living there with her husband and 10-month-old son, George. It should be noted that there was some doubt about who young George's father was. Anyway...
Anna, me. It wasn't me.
Well, anyway, Anna died upstairs after she took rat poison. And then in 1921, another daughter, Rose, played it safe and married an accountant called Otto Schaefer.
Right.
But just 2 months later, poor old Otto died of heart failure after an appendicitis operation.
Oh, gee.
Now, it was during this period of misfortune that clairvoyants became regular guests at Mrs. Walker's boarding house.
Right.
As early as 1909, there was a Mr. Joseph Francis Bostock who promoted himself as a clairvoyant, psychometrist, herbalist, and magnetic healer.
Right.
Now, he could be consulted at Mrs. Walter's boarding house every Thursday.
Wow.
Now, back then, fortune-telling was illegal, right? So you had to be careful how you described yourself.
Wow,
but still, Bostock was later charged with fraud for representing himself as having the power and ability to predict future events. Anyway, there was more, because come 1910, Mr. Stevenson was another clairvoyant and herbalist to set up shop at Mrs. Walter's place. He advertised that he could be consulted on everything. That included both health and business matters. Wow. Now, I guess he was an early financial planner because he was pretty expensive too, charging half a crown for private sittings.
Wow.
Now, the longest-serving clairvoyant was Agnes Charlotte Dwyer, who was professionally known as Madame Langdon. Now, from 1914 through to the mid-1930s, Madame Langdon was working as a consulting herbalist and a mental and magnetic healer at the boarding house.
Wow.
Now, Mrs. Walter passed away in 1935, having run the house for around 40 years. And, Danny, do you know where that boarding house was?
No. Tell us.
Just look around you, Danny. That spooky, clairvoyant Mrs. Walter's boarding house was right where you are now, on the site of Choices Flooring and the West Bremer Radio Studios. Right there in the heart and soul of Ipswich.
I thought someone was watching me when I was having a little wee-wee before.
Yeah, you knew it all along, didn't you?
Is that right? And those herbalists, were they using a herb called marijuana? It was very expensive.
Well, they could well have been using opium. That was certainly used for a time. But yeah, they had to be careful how they described themselves.
So this building was actually a boarding house, and it's supposed to have a couple of ghosts here?
Well, I don't know about ghosts. You'll have to ask
Steve.
our ghostman.
Ask Steve.
Ask Steve. Yeah, absolutely. Ask Jack. But certainly there were deaths there, there was suicides there, and there was clairvoyance for 40 years.
There were suicides in this building?
Oh. Yeah, there was a rat poison.
Oh, was that done on purpose, eating the rat poison?
Well, yeah. Do you often drink rat poison accidentally?
Well, not really, I suppose, unless I'm a rat. All right, well, mate, don't forget about... Mate, what great stories. Are you listening, Ipswich City Council? Mayor, this bloke you should endorse him doing a book and publish it for him about Ipswich. These are great stories, mate, seriously. And next time I go to the toilet, I'll be watching to see if that ghost is not watching me. And it's a woman too. She's
just
a pervert.
Be careful.
Now, look, Dover Court, Toowong's hidden treasure and its people. How do we find out about this story you've told and this book?
Yeah, in fact, from tomorrow morning, you can read the full story today and see photos of Madame Langdon, Mrs. Walter, and her boarding house at historyouthere.com, and that's where you can also get the book Dover Court.
Isn't that wonderful? You told Steve about the history of this building, the owner?
I will.
Steve Mallett.
I'm going to call him today.
Good on you, mate. That's wonderful. Another great story from our Ipswich historian. His name is Harry the H. Peacock, and it's 8:20. We're live, we're local in the heart and soul of Ipswich.